Well, hey guys, we're here to talk today about vision as part of our new vision series. It's a 3-week series called Our Father. And these times are so important as we come together to discern what God is inviting us to in our community. What's his vision for our church in the next season? And so we're sitting down today with Andrew and Rosie,
hey, John.
our senior pastors.
Hello.
And they're going to talk to us a little bit about why they started the church, what they're celebrating, and what they feel God is inviting us to in this next season. Yeah. So guys, talk to us a little bit about, you started this church almost 30 years ago. A lot of time in there. What was your heart when you started the church? What were the things you most deeply wanted to see?
Most deeply, we wanted to be a place where people could encounter God and learn to follow Jesus together. Yeah. That was the absolute heart of it all. I think we knew that multiplication and being generous is in our DNA, so we wanted to be a church that would plant other churches. And I think we just wanted to be a place where God was present and working, and that we could deeply welcome the work of the Spirit. So there was like God stuff happening, but not in any way that was religious.
And I think we wanted to build like an authentic community of people, a family of people, if you like, who were learning to walk together, to follow Jesus together, and try and work out what it means to be authentic Jesus followers in our culture today. And I think that's what we've done.
Absolutely. And now 30 years on,
yes,
a lot has changed. But
grey hair.
Exactly. So tell us some of the things that you're celebrating right now, today. What are the current stories? What are you loving to see?
So much to celebrate. Gosh, I think back a year ago and look what the world was like. We were just trying to work out what it meant to come out of the pandemic, the most chaotic couple of years of our lives, weren't we? What would it look like to regather, to regrow teams? It was just a time of change, wasn't it? But I think we always felt, even a year ago, we felt like God wasn't going to waste those years, and that he wasn't calling us to go back to church, but he was calling us on into something new. And now I look at church on a Sunday and I think about it during the week, and there is so much to celebrate. We have visitors coming every week, finding Jesus, finding a home here. Our services are growing, our kids groups are growing, our children are encountering Jesus, our teams are growing again.
The small groups,
absolutely. We're planting new small groups so that all the new people that are joining our church have a place to go and be family. And I think that one of the things that thrills my heart the most is the cultural diversity that we're seeing in our church. It was always our heart that our church would in some way mirror the city that we live in, the cultural diversity in our city. And so when I stand in our church and I look around at all the different nationalities that God has brought to be part of our family, I think for me that's probably one of the most thrilling things. I absolutely love it. So much to celebrate.
Absolutely. Well, you talked about before about this church. You wanted this church to be a church that plants churches. So, we've been planting churches now for these 30 years. How have we seen God use that? How have we seen him blessing that?
Well, I think, as I cast my mind back, I think we were sort of low on skill but big on heart. I think the truth is we were just making ourselves available, but God's been really kind over those years. I think the freedom to try meant that we just have had a chance to take risks and adventure with Jesus together. I mean, looking on, we probably planted 18 churches directly, but also there are like spiritual kind of kids and grandkids and great-grandkids, churches that have been planted, who've planted other churches. That kind of family network goes on, and it's quite big, and there's people all over the place. I think really for us, we've been a training church, a place where people can try, take risks, learn and grow, and we've seen that be part of our story, which is a real joy.
And so why did you just decide that church planting was a good thing to do? What is the thought behind doing that?
Well, I think I love coming into church, whether it's whichever space we come to, and seeing a room full of people and meeting friends, and it's great. But then I realised that there's lots of people who haven't yet made it to the door, and Jesus came for them as much as he came for those in the room. And I think to keep that in mind helps us realise that's the mission of Jesus, and that's why we're here. We can't reach everybody, but we can reach some more. And actually, the whole thing about making spaces, planting groups, planting sites, planting churches is just saying we're keeping the mission of Jesus at the very heart of our focus and what we're about as a church.
And the reality is that some people are happy to get in a car and drive into the city centre or to Southside to go to church, but there are other people who are just very rooted in their community, or maybe they don't have cars or they're dependent on public transport, and actually it's a big hike to come to one of our existing sites. And there are people rooted in their community that want to be able to invite their neighbour, so hey, come on, let's go down the road to church. And so I think we've realised that we need to have churches or expressions of church in lots of different locations in our city to make Jesus accessible to our friends and our neighbours.
Absolutely. And as you said, you've planted 18 churches now, but we've also now got 2 and a third emerging site. So talk to us about multi-site. This sometimes people aren't really sure what it means. So what's the heart behind multi-site? What's the purpose of it? Why do we do it?
Well, I think multi-site is a bit of a best of both scenario. So it's the best of both, that you've got the freedom of like a church plant situation. You're focused on a new adventure, a new mission in a community to try and be the hands and feet of Jesus in that place. But it's also got the backing of a larger family. So it's got this sort of space to innovate in a community, to try and reach out and be on God's mission, but recognizing there's a bigger kind of wider family that is rooting for you and supporting that.
Yeah, and there's also freedom for new leaders to emerge and spaces for people to try. You know, when I look back to us in our young 20s, we were just having a go, but it was such fun. And when you have different expressions of church, there are lots and lots of different places where people can have a go and see them using their gifts. So if we've got 5 sites, then there are 5 or 10 different worship bands, aren't there? And all of those spaces for people to have a go. And teams, and maybe you want to have a try at doing kids work, or maybe you want to be on the hospitality team and make church feel like a home. Multi-site gives so many, or even preaching. Multi-site gives so many different opportunities for people to just have a go at doing the thing that God's created them to do and seeing his kingdom coming.
Absolutely. And now, so as I said, we're in 2 with a third emerging site, and we're online as well in loads of different spaces.
Right.
And anyone who's been around us for any length of time will know that we're all about following Jesus, living life to the full,
and making a difference.
Absolutely. And we rejoice that our church will be able to recite that as what it means to be part of Birmingham Vineyard. But what's the strategy? How do we help Birmingham, not just us, but how do we help Birmingham to follow Jesus, live life to the full, and make a difference? What do we feel like God is inviting us to in this next season?
Yeah, if we're going to do that, and it's not just going to be a sort of a strap line, we want to welcome newcomers every week in every location.
Yeah.
That involves us thinking about our friends and inviting them, but also recognizing those who are coming through the door. So it's welcoming new people in every space, every week, every time we gather. Yeah. But because of that, we need to plant a new group every month, at least a new group every month, because new people find it easier to get connected to new small groups. And alongside that, we need to plant a new site or a church every year. That's what we feel is in focus as a specific for next steps.
And really having a specific vision, welcoming newcomers, planting new groups, and planting new sites and churches. Having that as the vision gives us a really clear focus for our prayer and for our action. Not as a pressure, not as something to beat us up if we don't quite make it, but to give us priorities that we can all get behind as a church and go, do you know what? We know where we're going. We know what the vision of this church is, and we're going to do this thing together. We're on a mission, like a family on a mission.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, some people listening to that might have fallen off their seats a little bit when they heard that. It's quite a big and audacious dream to plant a new site every year or plant a new group every month. Talk to us a little bit about why is it important to have such audacious, big dreams that go beyond ourselves and we need to rely on God for? Why is that important? Talk to us about faith.
Well, if we just limit our life to what's possible just by being smart and working hard, then that's not a life of faith. Jesus said to 12 people, go into the whole world and make disciples of all nations. That was way beyond them.
It's audacious.
It was crazy. But then with the coming of the Spirit and surrendered lives, look what God did.
Yeah.
And for us, we've seen that as part of our story. When we give Jesus our yes and we welcome the power of the Spirit and we take risks, then God meets us in those moments. And we've seen that with the planting of Eastside. We're just overjoyed with Chris and Rachel just launching into a new community, planting a site. It's just great. And I think as they've stepped into that, there's blessing for them, but there's blessing for the whole church because we're actually doing what we're made for. That's part of what we're here for, to be on God's mission together. Yeah,
and there are plenty of environments, aren't there? We'll all know them, where the goal is just to get back to normal after COVID, but frankly, that's not very exciting, and it's not really very inspiring. It's not a vision to chase after and get behind, is it? And it's not what the Father's doing. And it's not what the Father's doing. As like we said, Jesus is leading us into something and onto something, and I think that's probably why we've been seeking Him, why we've been praying, why we've been going, God, what's the new thing? What's the new hill that you want us to take together? And this really just feels like God's going, I've got things for you to do, and let's set them out and make it clear. So we're excited.
Absolutely.
We're excited about the adventure ahead.
And so as people are listening on, even as I myself think about how can I get involved in the church in this new direction, in this focus that we've got, how are some of the ways that we can get involved in that?
I think there's a few ways. I think the first one is pray. We've got a week of prayer coming up, and I just invite everyone to engage in that moment. Pray that more people would come to follow Jesus, that they'd experience the faith, hope and love that only he brings. I think we want to pray that we'd be a generous church, that we've got resources to do what we're called to do, that we have favour with buildings and spaces, and just pray that God would do immeasurably more than we could ask or imagine.
Absolutely.
And then discern. I think God's going to be speaking to members of our church community about a calling to lead, or maybe a calling to be part of a new team that's going to go out into a new part of the city. So there's a moment for us to be asking God and saying, what's my part in this adventure?
Yeah, what's my next step maybe?
In the week of prayer, we're going to be praying in some new communities.
Yeah, that's true.
And we would want to invite people to come and get involved and prayer walk and just sense what's the Father doing in this community, and be openly asking God, are you calling me to step up? Are you calling me to get involved? Yeah.
I think the next one would be give. I think we want to give of our lives again. I think this is a moment of just saying, I'm all in with you, Jesus, and whatever you've got for me in my story. I think giving is just laying down what we have and putting it in the hands of Jesus. And so that's giving our lives, giving our time, giving our resources. And so I think if you're in the room and you've enjoyed being around, you're probably here because someone else has given before you. You're the recipient of someone else's generosity and sacrifice.
Well, like this building.
Yeah, well, in many ways. And God is just saying, hey, listen, let's just say yes again to Jesus and let's pay it forward. Let's just be generous with the lives, with the time that we have, and just pray that God would extend his kingdom as we say yes.
Yeah. And I think the other thing would be get involved and invite your friends. We are in a moment of cultural turmoil, but they say that in a cultural turmoil, there's a greater openness to the gospel. And I don't know about you, but I know people that are seeking and they're going, things aren't quite working right now. And they're looking for Jesus. They might not know it yet, but they are. They're looking for Jesus because he can give us stability and he can be a rock that we can stand on in the midst of everything that's going on in the world. So, I think get involved. Invite your friends. We have an answer for them. And ultimately, we're existing for people who don't yet know Jesus. And so, in the exploration of the adventure of planting new sites, it gives a wonderful opportunity to say, hey, come and get involved in doing something new.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you for your time. We love to hear your heart about what you think God has for us as a church, and we are so excited for this new season. Back to you guys in your sites.
Thanks, John.